Diplomacy, Security, and Challenges. I'd like to introduce His Excellency Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, the Ambassador for the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to the United States, as well as His Excellency Dr. Hamdullah Mohib, the Ambassador of Afghanistan to the United States, and Dr. Marvin Weinbaum. Thank you.
Well, welcome this afternoon for a dialogue between the ambassadors of the Islamic Republics of Pakistan and Afghanistan. I'm Marvin Weinbaum from the Middle East Institute. The Institute has helped promote this event today. I also serve on the Academic Advisory Panel for INDUS, sponsor of today's discussion. I'd now like to call on Mr. Shahzad Habib, who is advisor to INDUS, and he's going to make some introductory remarks. Mr. Habib, a leader in the area's business community, was instrumental in conceiving of the dialogue and bringing it to fruition. Mr. Habib.
Thank you, Marvin, for your kind introduction and for moderating today's very important discussion. We have a full house, so hello everybody, and thank you for making time to come today. First, on behalf of the team and the attendees, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to the participants, Ambassador Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry of Pakistan and Ambassador Hamdullah Mohib of Afghanistan. Thank you both for being today in a public forum, willing to discuss some of the issues between your two countries. A few quick comments before we get started. It is important to remember that Pakistan and Afghanistan are two countries with many things in common: religion, ethnic groups, and hundreds of miles of shared borders. Another item that would be very important is their relationship with the United States. As a consequence, choices made here in Washington, D.C. affect real people over there. There is a human component to this, and we should remember that. It is why our team helped bring this event to life. So for the ambassadors to be here today, publicly to advance our dialogue with representatives from the White House, the State Department, the Department of Defense, and other key stakeholders, it is a very positive symbol. Personally, I hope that today is part of a process that will positively affect the future of the Afghan and Pakistani people and others, and the citizens, ours and theirs, as well as the world. So quickly, before I turn it over, here is what I think in terms of bottom line. As a businessman, I like to think about the bottom line. There are individuals over there with great passion, skills, and education, but for them to achieve their potential, they need the right environment, which has security, stability, and good governance. They need the opportunity to achieve. Once we're all rowing in the same direction, once we're all on the same side of the fence, I believe they will get that right environment. With that said, I'd just like to say a few words about INDUS. INDUS is a Washington, D.C. based think tank, a nonpartisan objective organization with 4 key missions and goals. The goal is to focus on policy discussions of critical and relevance to Pakistan, youth leadership development, focusing on rights of the individuals, as well as lastly, community integration in our homeland, USA. Thank you very much.
And now I wish to introduce Mr. Attar Javed, who is the principal founder and the president of INDUS.
Thank you, Marvin. Your Excellency, Ambassador Dr. Hamdullah Mohib, Ambassador of Afghanistan to United States, Your Excellency, Dr. Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, Ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to United States. Welcome to this forum. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. First of all, on behalf of the INDUS team, I would like to thank the Afghan and Pakistani embassies in Washington, D.C. for outstanding outreach and collaboration extended to INDUS. My profound thanks are also due to Mr. Habib, Dr. Marvin Weinbaum, Dr. Nasir Naveed, and Mr. David Silverman for their tremendous efforts in making this event possible. Now, a word about INDUS. INDUS Mobilizing People's Power is a registered nonprofit think tank and research organization dedicated to democratic ideals, progressive, politically stable Pakistan, and strong US-Pakistan relations. Our approach is based on two important fundamentals. Number one, major public policy events in the modern era have originated in the academic world. Number two, important changes of political nature are not politicians, political parties, or financial contributions, but ideas from research organizations, think tanks, and college campuses. In this line, it is our endeavor to bring an international relationship issue that poses a threat to regional or international peace and stability to the forefront, to engage the academic world, think tanks, and research organizations to help about a positive change. Pakistan-Afghan relations is one such issue of critical importance. Since 2001, when Taliban were forced from power, the Taliban have been regrouping in the border regions. Today, the resurgent Taliban and their supporters want to dislodge US forces from Afghanistan as well as attack Afghan, Pakistani, and US governments. Fortunately, despite these disagreements between leaders on both capitals, there are practical people to stabilize the situation on the border. Afghan and Pakistani forces have agreed to a common standard operating procedure. This discussion will highlight the role the two countries can play in stabilizing the situation and preventing further complexities introduced by geopolitical expansion of the conflict. The discussion could also shed some light on Pakistan's fears of strategic encirclement by two neighbors, namely India and Afghanistan. To state the obvious, more stable and cooperative Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship could pave the way for an eventual end to fighting that has continued almost unabated since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. I thank you very much for your attention.
Before my introduction of the ambassadors, let me say that their presence here today stands as testimony to their confidence and open-mindedness. I think it's also testimony to their commitment to promoting cooperation between the two countries in areas of common interest and concern. Ambassador Hamdullah Mohib, welcome.
Thank you.
Ambassador has been Chief of Staff to the President of Afghanistan, where he served in many capacities, including overseeing the President's office, official correspondence, and protocol arrangements with other countries. He was deeply involved in the drafting of bilateral agreements with other countries. Ambassador Chaudhry, Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, arrived in Washington more recently and March. He previously served, as many people in this audience know, as Pakistan's Foreign Secretary, and prior to that as spokesman for the Foreign Ministry. He's been at the United Nations in New York as Deputy Permanent Representative. Ambassador Chaudhry has also been ambassador to Netherlands. And there is a fuller biography in the sheets that are available outside. Gentlemen, let me, as an opening here, ask you, why is this relationship so important? Why is it important to the two countries, but not just to them, to the region and to all of us, including here in the United States? Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Weinbaum. And I should also thank the organizers, the INDUS Group, and also the Carnegie Foundation, which provided this venue. So thank you very much for organizing this. I agree with you that it's a very collegial, cordial setting, reflecting the desire on both parts, I would say, both Pakistan and Afghanistan, to see a strong relationship. And I see every reason why we should both wish that to be the case. And let me tell you my perspective, and then Ambassador Mohib can join in that. I believe that in our case, time has shown and history has shown that whenever Afghanistan was unstable, the instability invariably flew and permeated through the borders towards Pakistan. And ever since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, we saw a number of developments which impinged directly on Pakistan. So we have a genuine vested national interest if Afghanistan becomes stable, sovereign, independent, and prosperous. Another reason why we think that Afghanistan should be a very stable country, and so should Pakistan be, and so should the relationship between the two, is because in the recent past, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, Pakistan has come a long way in defeating terrorism within our own borders. You all are well aware of the history. I don't have to go into it. But once these, after 9/11, militants came onto the tribal areas straddling between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the Pakistan government decided to support the international community, we became a legitimate target. And we suffered enormously between the years 2004 and 2014. It was only after a nationwide consensus was built that the narrative that the Taliban and the other militants had put forward was simply terrorism and nothing else, that we started taking action. And we started with clearing up North Waziristan in particular, which had become home to many of these militants who had come after the Tora Bora bombing and made their hideouts there and infrastructure there. And we were able to clear that entire territory within a short span of 2 years. Now, this was a remarkable achievement, although at a huge cost, because over 5,000 of our soldiers and officers lost their lives. But they were all convinced, their families were convinced that this was a sacrifice worth paying, because we wanted a stable Pakistan. And once that happened, today the country is far more secure and safe. We can also see that that is having a salutary effect on the economic situation. And economy is picking up, the indicators are better. And we can see that all these better economic situation and better law and order situation is attracting investments. And we are attracting a lot of investments from all across, including from corporate America. So, but these gains that we have made in the security domain and in the economic domain could be tentative and at risk if Afghanistan does not become stable. So this is another solid reason for us, a strategic reason for Pakistan to see Afghanistan stabilize. If Afghanistan becomes stable, we will probably be the most or the biggest beneficiary. And if Afghanistan is unstable, perhaps we will be the biggest loser if that were to be the case. So that part for the bilateral component. You also, your question also indicated how is it important to the world and how is it important to the region. I think it's a very valid question. Let me start from the country where we are sitting in, United States of America, your country. And I believe that the United States also has a genuine interest to stabilize Afghanistan. After all, it's been a long time, 15, 16 years, billions of economic and military investment. The United States has paid in blood and treasure, and I think the United States has every reason to see that Afghanistan should stabilize. You cannot have an open-ended, indefinite war in that country. It is first and foremost most unfortunate and unfair to the people of Afghanistan who have paid enormous sacrifice for that. But the United States too has paid that price, and therefore the United States too would like to see it stabilize. So I see a very genuine reason for your country also to work together with the countries of the region, of course, foremost with the Afghan government. I also believe that other countries in the region too have a stake in a stable Afghanistan. Afghanistan, unfortunately, became a victim of horrible terrorism by so many militant groups. And there are varying reports that not entire country is within the control of Afghan National Security Forces. Now that is a point of worry, obviously, because if there are ungoverned spaces, militants of the world walk in. And we do hear reports of Daesh or ISIS as it is called also coming in, and particularly when we hear that they are in Nangarhar province, which is the eastern province bordering Pakistan, we are obviously concerned, and I think so should the entire region, and the world should be concerned that all these militants would once again have space in Afghanistan. So there is every reason for Pakistan, Afghanistan, United States, China, all countries of the region to see a stable Afghanistan, and that is what we in Pakistan would wish more than anybody else, and we stand ready to cooperate and in whatever manner we can contribute to that objective.
Thank you. Ambassador.
Thank you. First, let me thank the INDUS Group and Marvin, to you and Carnegie for facilitating today's discussion. I would also like to extend my appreciation of Ambassador Chaudhry for being here. You're right, this is our signal to bilateral cooperation and wishing to extend that beyond our two boundaries. We have had a good relationship in the past with Pakistan's embassy, and we can hope to continue to have that dialogue here. Because as Ambassador Chaudhry mentioned, there are two main reasons that he brought up. One was security and the other was economic. And I would also like to add a third one, and that is criminality. And for that, we have to cooperate. On the security front, terrorism is a unilateral threat to both our countries and the region. On the economy, I'm glad to see that Pakistan's economy is picking up, so is Afghanistan, but the majority of the youth from this region have to work abroad, many in almost modern slavery type kind of labor abroad, where they can, if the economy was better, stay in their own country. So it's in our mutual interest to carry it on. A third one is criminality. The global trade that's emanating from there, of the illegal trade, from the heroin trade alone, is worth a third of Pakistan's economy. Now that is just the heroin trade. Add other criminality, corruption to it, and human smuggling, drugs, weapon smuggling, and every other syndicate that this operation does. it matches that economy. And what we are a threat from is those criminals taking over. Right? So it's in our interest and it's in Pakistan's interest, and I think we see it as a non-zero sum game, because if Afghanistan win, it's not a loss for Pakistan. We all win, and the region wins.
Yes. Let me ask, though, since you didn't exactly address this, is it not that the security of the region and stability of the region is also at stake here? If both countries suffer destabilization, they are important for their position as trade routes, for the danger here that whatever afflicts either country can infect the wider region. Would you agree with that? Mr.
Weinbaum, I agree. And since we're here, we would like to, no dialogue is ever going to go anywhere if there is no candidacy in it. We know what the objectives of the Afghans are for this war. And our president has called this conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan an undeclared war on us. And we call it an undeclared war because the objectives are not set. We don't know what the objectives are for Pakistan's sake. And that's something that we have been trying to discover. The President Ghani invested a huge amount of political capital in reaching out to Pakistan, and we've been doing it throughout the world. This is one example of this, our extending hand, an olive branch to Pakistan to understand what are the objectives of this war, of this undeclared war, because in the end, terrorism, like I said, is a unilateral threat to both our countries, and if terrorism prevails, the region loses. So I think this would be a good opportunity for us to understand and the public to understand what are the objectives of this war for Pakistan's sake, so that we can maybe address that.
Yeah, sure. I think I agree with the ambassador that candor is important, and I think I'm glad that he pointed out the recent statement by Ashraf Ghani, President of Afghanistan, about the undeclared war. It's not something new. We have heard for the last 1.5 years to 2 years a mantra of along these lines. In fact, much more hostile rhetoric has been voiced. But it has been our view that we will not respond to that hostility because we do recognize the sufferings in Afghanistan and also in our own country. And we do not think that blame game would get any country any far. Even if we were to, give some consideration to this mantra, I think it is too simplistic to say that all the ills of today's Afghanistan are because of Pakistan. I think there are a host of issues that prevail in Afghanistan, including from governance issues, corruption issues, weakening of the Afghan National Security Forces issues, drug production and drug trade issues, and economic stress issues. So therefore, I think just to simply put the blame on Pakistan could at best deflect attention from the real causes of instability in Afghanistan. I think Afghanistan needs to focus inward and see in itself what is it that it needs to do. It needs to own up the problems that it has and not constantly shift the blame to Pakistan. Even if academically speaking, the Pakistan-Afghanistan border is sealed completely with not even birds flying across, will it fix Afghanistan? Will it bring that stability to Afghanistan? I think we need to be realistic. Instead of hurling blames all the time, as we say, we need a friendship, we need a cooperative spirit. a spirit that was in demonstration more recently in the Astana SCO summit sideline meeting between Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and President Ashraf Ghani. I think some very positive vibes came out of that. That's the spirit we need, and I understand that the two countries would now be holding consultations to prepare some kind of mechanism to coordinate their actions against terrorists. These terrorists are nobody's friend. We would not like to see Taliban come to power by force in Afghanistan. And we have made it very clear that they do not represent Pakistan in any manner. And we are squeezing space on them. And therefore, we would humbly suggest to curb this tendency of scapegoating Pakistan, because that will not solve the real issue. Thank you.
Pastor, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, I think I agree. We shouldn't just be looking outward. Inward looking is extremely important for Afghanistan. And I must say that despite our domestic issues, I think domestic issues that any democracy would have, I think corruption is not just restricted to Afghanistan. Pakistan shares a fair share of that. In their own, and we would never point to it because I think it's a domestic Pakistani issue. And we are a free country with a free media, and we're very transparent in that manner. So our problems are out like an open book. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean those problems don't exist in other countries. It just shows our commitment to resolving them and not hiding the space. But despite all of our internal issues, there is consensus in Afghanistan over our foreign policy. There is consensus over the defeating of terrorism. There is consensus that we want to end that criminality in our region. I am afraid it's not a blame game. It's for our understanding, and it's always these smokes mirrors whenever we have a candid discussion, that it shifts from a real conversation that can take us to a place where it's branded as blame game. Terrorism is not a bilateral issue. It's not a trilateral or a quadrilateral issue. It's a global concept. It's a global threat. And we would like to address it not just for ourselves. There is an entire world fighting terrorism in our country, both the militants and there are foreign troops on our ground that is fighting this terrorism. They're there because they see it as a threat to itself, not just a threat to Afghanistan. And as far as we give space to terrorism, and I agree that Pakistan took action against those that were a threat to Pakistan, those terrorists. We would like to see that kind of action taken against those that are a threat to the globe as well, not just Afghanistan, but globally. Last year, the Taliban had close to 29,000 casualties. Where were they treated? These are simple questions that anybody can ask and any answers. 29,000 casualties. What hospitals? There are no hospitals in the ungoverned spaces that can treat those injured. There are also no fundraising efforts in the ungoverned spaces. That requires, this is not a cheap war. It requires huge amount of resources. The Taliban today are equipped with very sophisticated weaponry. It comes from a place. It comes for support. They're also training. Our security forces are trained by the US and NATO forces. Where is the training that comes to the Taliban and the logistical supports that come to it? Anybody who mistakes that there are differences between these terrorist groups, whether we distinguish between them as Taliban, or as TTP, as Daesh, or IMU, or ETIM, they'd be making a huge mistake, because while their leadership may have differences in political opinion, the fighters on the ground have the same ideology. You cannot distinguish between a Daesh fighter and a Taliban fighter, an IMU fighter, an ETIM fighter. And if it was a blame game, as the ambassador mentioned, then it should only have been Afghanistan. the among Pakistan's four neighbors, Iran has also come out and raised its concerns over terrorism, sponsor of terrorism from Pakistan's front. It only leaves China, and I think if this trend continues, this trend of tolerating terrorism or sponsor for terrorism, soon the Chinese will have its own issues over ATIM. That would only leave the fish. And I don't think if they could complain, they would too.
Yeah, sure. No, I agree that terrorism is a global phenomena. And in fact, in the region where we are located and the broader region, including Middle East, it is manifested everywhere. It is also manifesting itself in Europe. And we recently saw what kind of terrorism was happening there, and not just by adherents of any one faith or creed or color. I think this is a phenomena that unfortunately reflects and represents the worst of the humanity. And therefore, all of us need to join hands in dealing with that. My summation is that if you see what Pakistan has done to defeat the forces of terrorism in a region and at a time when that region is still grappling with that evil. And we have shown that it can be reversed. We suffered right up to 2014, 150 terrorist incidents on the average per month. Today, you cannot count them on the fingers of a single hand. Now, that is a remarkable achievement that we have done. It would not have been possible if we were to distinguish between good terrorists or bad terrorists. That's not a policy, that's a blame. And that's why I'm saying that results show for themselves what we have achieved. And we are very proud of that, and we are very happy about that. We would not like any group from Pakistan to plan any kind of terrorism against Afghanistan or anywhere else. And last year, when the momentum was to form a QCG, a quadrilateral coordination group comprising United States, China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan to push for reconciliation, we facilitated. But once it became clear that our Afghan brothers want us to squeeze space on Taliban, our messaging to Taliban was very, very clear. That if you want to live in this country, like 3 million Afghan refugees are living, you should live peacefully. Otherwise, you should simply leave. And we started squeezing space. For in the last 8 to 9 months, that is exactly what we have done. And today, the result is that all these hospitals that Ambassador is referring to, they are empty. The property prices are down because all these refugees, in the garb of which some of the Taliban were also living, are now going back. And their recruitment base and their financial base is in Afghanistan. And that is the result, that is the reason why insurgency in Afghanistan actually never died down, even during the winters. All this talk of spring offensive was as if, some kind of artificial deadline, because it always continued all through the winters. So we have to really see the reasons, as I indicated to you, that the best way is not to shift the blame to Pakistan, but to work with Pakistan. Recognize our legitimate interests, which are to see a stable Afghanistan, which are to see that the soil of Afghanistan is not used against Pakistan. It is extremely important to us. We have suffered from that. When we were able to defeat the wave of terrorism from our own country, we saw that many of them shifted to the eastern provinces in Afghanistan and made their hideouts. They were the ones who caused December 2014 attack on the school children and mercilessly butchering 137 children. It was heartbreaking for everyone to see. And while this horrible incident was going on, we conveyed the coordinates to the Afghan authorities and to the US authorities that this is where these directions are coming. And it's not just one. Then the Charsada attack, the Lahore attack, all these. So we don't want Afghan soil to be used either by the TTP or such militants which are anti-Pakistan, or by any other country, particularly our eastern neighbor. So we would expect that Pakistan's legitimate interest is also recognized. We stand by our commitment that our soil will not be used against Afghanistan, and we are working on that.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think we agree that in no soil should be used against any. And our sympathies for the losses of the Charsada and the Peshawar attack we have extended. You know, we know the price of our own losses. This past month alone, there was military-grade bombs that were brought upon us in the month of Ramadan. One that killed close to 150 and injured 500 in just one attack alone. And there has been a series of those. And once again, like I said, those military-grade explosives are not produced in the ungoverned spaces of Afghanistan, or there is a, like we said before, there is verification mechanism. If anyone knows of any factories in Afghanistan, more than welcome to come and show it to us. So there are real issues, and I think, Ambassador, I agree with you that we must work with Pakistan, and we do. And this is why we're here. But which Pakistan? The Pakistan that's occupied by a militant group, by a military, or the Pakistan of the civilians? The civilians don't have a chance in Pakistan. This is the longest government in Pakistan that is led by the civilians and elected by its people. And it doesn't have a voice. Today, you can tell me all you want, but the reality is the promises or the policies are made by the military. And you're talking about a military that today perhaps has liberal mindset, and today uses this kind of militancy as a foreign policy tool. But there is a new generation in the rise in the military, the generation that is being trained by the Dawah Institute of Ziaul Haq, that is going to take over Pakistan in the next decade or so. Once it does, this is no longer going to be a military that's trying to use extremism as a tool for foreign policy, right? As it's not going to be a fear of India. You brought the fear of India. We'll never be using our soil against. But this generation who believes that there is a fear of Afghanistan soil being used against Pakistan is going to be the least of the world's problems. It's going to be an extremist military that is going to be over 1 million strong, with very sophisticated intelligence, plus nuclearly armed. And it will take, from our experience, at least 4 decades to clear Pakistan from that generation of extremists, right? And this is not a problem we are seriously concerned in Afghanistan. We're not just worried about today's militancy in Afghanistan. We're worried about the next 4 decades of our life, and not just us. The world should worry. Every weapon, anything you sell to Pakistan today will be used against it. This is a message to the Chinese. This is a message to Americans. This is a message to Europeans, because there is an extremist military in the rise. And you know this problem as well as we do. We would like to see a civilian government in Pakistan, a strong civilian government in Pakistan. We would like to support it. We have no problems with the Pakistani people. They are our brothers. We share so much with them. We share a history with them. We share, like you said, over 4,000 miles of border with them. We share culture in many ways, where we share a language. A big ethnicity in Afghanistan shares a language with Pakistan. There is so much in common with Pakistan, and there is so much at stake for both of our countries. We're holding Central Asia back today. Right? We're holding Central Asia's economy back. Pakistan is starved for energy. There is a lot of the energy that Central Asia could export is blocked because of the conflict. At the same time, instead of competing on any other front, Pakistan could compete with India on an economic front, and that would be a huge market, much bigger than India has on its own. Afghanistan would be your market for your products. We don't make much. So would be Central Asia, who is expecting that. So we can all benefit from a cooperation, but we must cooperate. We don't know which government we're cooperating with, the civilian that doesn't have the authority or the military. And we are also confused if we cooperate with the military more. Are we emboldening? Are we encouraging more of a military Pakistan? And if, or are we solving our problem? Because it's always difficult on who we are talking to that has the authority to resolve the conflict.
I'm going to ask this question, which follows, I think, from some of the discussion here. And it's a difficult one. Can you, in your own country, identify those elements that do not want to see cooperation between the two countries, and that these are elements which do matter? Pastor?
Yeah, sure. But let me first reflect on what happened in Kabul. It was a deadly attack, and we immediately condemned it, and we said that it must be condemned with all the might that one has.
Thank you.
It was a horrible attack, and whoever has done it is no friend of Pakistan or Afghanistan or anybody. But the tendency to automatically shift the blame is something that I think needs to be addressed by the Afghans themselves. I'll give you an example. There are voices from within Afghanistan, and I'll read to you a statement from one of the factions joining the government. This was from Jamiat Islami, and I'm quote unquote, there are various individuals and circles in the country's security institutions that may be colluding with terrorists. It also goes on, the heads of governments of national unities, security institutions lack ability and will to sufficiently protect the lives of people and effectively combat terrorist networks in the country. I think there are wheels within wheels. I think that it would be important, and I understand the Afghan National Security Advisor has also made some statement to work on what's happening on the insider attacks and all that. Well, that is part of their own job, they should do that. But I would also like to say that I would not like to make any comment on the democratic path in Pakistan, because that is our internal matter. I would refrain, and as a matter of principle, in my entire diplomatic career, I am on record, I have never made any comment on the internal matters of any country, including the United States. Including the United States. And neither Afghanistan, nor India, nor anybody else. It is a matter of principle for me, and I take exception to a direct comment that Ambassador made, which was undiplomatic to say the least. The India factor, you said that are there elements that may not be interested? Yes, I think India is not interested in peace in Afghanistan. And it has a strategic reason for doing so. There is a reason why it has opposed reconciliation all along. Because for them, it is not Afghanistan, it is Pakistan. So they have followed this strategy of double squeeze and two-front situation. And that is why they have obliged Pakistan to maintain 200,000 troops on the western border. So they are working for that strategy. And I think it is important for the world also to understand whether the Indian presence in Afghanistan is all that benign. So there are elements, yes, to respond to your question, that they are. Ambassador's point of view for benefits of stability in Afghanistan, indeed there are numerous benefits, not only for Central Asia, but for the whole region. And this China-Pakistan economic corridor, the whole concept is basically to increase connectivity. And we would like Afghanistan to be the first beneficiary of that, in fact, ahead of Central Asia. And we're already talking to the Chinese that there should be a westward extension of CPAC to Afghanistan. And when we had this ECO summit in Pakistan, Islamabad, all Central Asian heads of state were there, because they could recognize that they are now well connected through the Gwadar port to the rest of the world. So yes, there is a much greater benefit if we were to cooperate in that sense. And Pakistan stands ready because we can see the benefit for us, but also for Afghanistan and for the whole region.
Marvin, to address two of the issues that Ambassador mentioned. First, Jamiat-e-Islami's statement. I think nobody should be afraid of a democratic voice. There are people within Afghanistan who are democratically raising their concern, using the freedom of speech as our core. It's within our constitution. We would never prevent that from anywhere, even in Pakistan, anywhere to happen. If people have doubts over a process, they must raise it. Again, this is an internal matter for us to raise consensus over peace. The question that most people in Afghanistan ask over peace is this a doable thing? Does Pakistan want peace? And there are questions. If we made peace with the current leaders of the Taliban today, in which ones are we making peace with? Wouldn't tomorrow, with the sanctuaries that exist, another group with another flag appear? So there are legitimate questions within Afghanistan's political circles about the prospects for peace. As for the usage of any other country of our soil, I think it goes down to the fears more than anything else. And we have called upon Pakistan several times to allow an independent verification system. So whoever they trust, and whoever they want us to come in, let them verify their claims and let them verify our claims. And then we'll see. To us, the question is, why? Why don't Pakistan want an independent verification of their claims? If it's such a huge concern for them, we're ready today. Let them identify it today, and I'll make it a word that we make it happen tomorrow.
Well, just a very brief comment on that. My reference to the Jamiat-e-Islami statement was not in regard to the fact that the statement was made. Of course, in any democratically elected government, there will be different voices. So I don't mind that. My point was that the fingers were being pointed on the reasons why militants were getting whatever they were getting. About the verification, I think today the entire tribal areas, which for centuries had not seen the democratic governance that was available to the settled areas, is under the state control. 95% of the people have gone back and they are building their lives, and a political package is being formed there. And we have issued an open invitation for people to come and see. In fact, there was a delegation from the US Senate, led by Senator McCain last July, which had gone to Pakistan, to all those areas. And on his return, he wrote an op-ed. And it's an open invitation from us to representatives and people from any walks of life to come and see what we have done and see if the so-called sanctuaries exist there or all they have been eliminated. I think it is for people to come and see for themselves. We are not afraid of any mechanism whereby people restore confidence in each other's ability to see what's happening. And that is the consultation which is now likely to get underway soon between Afghanistan and Pakistan. How do we verify that actions have been taken? Pakistan has, it's for all to see. People can come and see for themselves. Of course, it will be on reciprocal basis because Afghan soil should not be used against Pakistan either. And that's why I think the answer lies not in heaping the blame on Pakistan, because that is used as an alibi to deflect attention from the failures. Not a good strategy. The good strategy would be to join hands in friendship and cooperation to defeat the common enemies, the terrorists.
You just mentioned here cooperation, which has been extended, I think, not just as we saw it at the SCO meeting, but the revigoration, if you will, of the quadrilateral group. So let me ask you, how realistic here are the prospects for some kind of political arrangement that would be satisfactory to both countries? Hassan?
Anything that can bring a chance of real stability to Afghanistan, we are committed to it. Like I said earlier, terrorism is not a bilateral, trilateral, or a quadrilateral issue. But we believe in the mechanisms that would bring stability, that would bring peace to Afghanistan, and we have been committed to it. This month alone, the tragedies, the casualties that have been inflicted on Afghanistan this month alone would not have been possible for anyone else to tolerate. Right? This is where our commitment continues to rely. But we must distinguish between who we're reconciling with and who is reconcilable. There are reconcilable elements, and we have identified, and this is where the quadrilateral process in the past had staggered, where we had a roadmap for the first time. We agreed upon a roadmap, and we had bilateral support from the other two countries, multilateral verification. And they signed up to it was to distinguish between those who are reconcilable, to bring them to the table, to do everything we can to do that, and to take action against irreconcilable. Now, there are four kinds of elements that fight. Those who have political or social grievances, who are reconcilable, and we have recently demonstrated that we can, and we have the capabilities within Afghanistan, within the Afghan government, to reconcile those elements. The Hizb Islami Gulbuddin Hekmatyar group is one of those recent successes. The second elements are those regional terrorists who exploit the space, who exploit the instability in the region. And are using it for their expansionist ideology. Then there are criminals who also benefit from the instability in the region and uses it for its criminal network. And this is where I alluded to the billions of dollars of income that is globally interconnected, and that's a threat to all of our countries in the region. And then there is a fourth one that is that we believe is used by foreign elements as non-state actors against our legitimate government elected by the people of Afghanistan for its foreign policy. I think when we talk about peace, we must talk about all these different elements. This is where the Kabul process was important. We invited all our regional partners and international partners to come together to address all of them. We are committed to reconcile those who have grievances against the Afghan government, social or political. What do we do with the others? What happens to foreign proxies? What happens to international terrorists that are operating in that region? And what happens to the criminals? Those are our joint efforts, and we would like to work together on addressing the other three, in addition to the reconcilables.
If I can just ask you, you spoke of a process here, and obviously you're looking at time. Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate that with the right incentives, there can be any time in the foreseeable future a grand bargain, which would somehow not only nullify the Taliban's insurgency, but also conceivably then bring other groups aboard? Or are you looking at, through this process, something which sets the pathway and which there may very well be no meeting in Geneva in which all the parties not only agree but then also adhere to the terms of the agreement?
I think when we talk about a process, we talk about all four of those elements. We're not talking about just, and again, even if we take just the one element, the Taliban, it's not a homogeneous group. It's not one Taliban that we can talk to. So there will be processes, and we're in the process of negotiating and talking to some of those elements that are willing to reconcile, though that process had been ongoing, and it will continue to be the case. What we're talking about is this bigger concept of where terrorism is finding sanctuary, finding space, and finding itself an conducive environment to operate in. How do we eliminate that process? How do we eliminate that space, completely eliminate it, so that nobody has to suffer from terrorism, but also to end this undeclared war on Afghanistan? And this is not been refuted. We have stated, President Ghani on his first trip to Pakistan said that there has been an undeclared war on Afghanistan. Nobody in Pakistan refuted that idea, which means that that war is waged, but without any objectives. We cannot end it without those state objectives. There are two elements in Afghanistan. There are two concepts. There is one that thinks that's mostly fed by outsiders who oversimplify the conflict by saying if the Afghan government sat down with the Taliban, that would be the end of the story, because they consider the Taliban the end of the group, that all of the trouble, and that would be reconciled. That would be the end of the conflict. The other element is this is not an internal war, and this is not an internal insurgency. This is a war waged on the Afghan people from another side, and there is lots of different elements to it. We cannot oversimplify it. We're ready to reconcile anytime, and we have proven that in the period.
Well, you talked about the quadrilateral coordination group and whether it has the potential to contribute in any manner. You would all recall that this group was created in the month of December 2015, worked for 5 months, produced a roadmap, but just about the time when we dispersed, the 4 countries dispersed after the 5th meeting, saying that we all go to Taliban because we have their own respective contexts, and we pushed them, nudged them, cajoled them, coerced them to come to the table. Thus, about that time, Mullah Akhtar Mansoor was killed by a drone strike, and then there was a political stalemate. Whether this group can come back to life and play a positive role, as Ambassador said, I agree. If this can work, why not? Whatever works. We are also flexible and open to any mechanism that will work to promote reconciliation. How? Now, reconciliation is between the government of Afghanistan, which we recognize as the democratically elected legitimate government, and the Afghan factions. And it is the responsibility of the Afghan government to lead that. That's why the term Afghan-led and Afghan-owned is used. And all other countries, including Pakistan, must facilitate that process. But sometimes the expectation is latched on to Pakistan that you would deliver the Taliban on the table, dead or alive. And we say that how can that happen? We are already squeezing space on them. They are on the run. And our ability or our leveraging with them has actually been eroded because of this policy of squeezing space on them, because of the ambiguous messaging that comes out of Afghan government for reconciliation, for the stalemate in Afghanistan, for the involvement of other regional players. So it's far more complicated than that. But I do agree that those who are able to reconcile must be reconciled through a political strategy. And those who are not reconcilable or so-called irreconcilable must be taken on by force and kinetics if required. So that is the kind of strategy we are looking for, and we hope that while the United States is working on a strategy which we are waiting for, and it will be a political strategy with an appropriate use of military force wherever it is required to find a lasting political solution in Afghanistan. We have no favorites for that matter. And we have always refrained from taking any favorites in Afghanistan. We want Afghanistan government to be stable and strong. As far as undeclared war reference, that was again brought in. The Kabul process of June 6th was essentially to build up a consensus and not to be used by President Ashraf Ghani, that he used to once again single out and blame Pakistan to deflect attention. I would most humbly again suggest that Afghan government should own up the issues, not just focus on scapegoating. I think it is very important for them to see that Pakistan is sincere and wants to work. But it would not happen until Afghanistan government is also ready to work with us. We are ready to work with them, and we will remain so.
I think you probably would both agree. Yes, I will. I think you probably would both agree that, from what I hear, that you would value external powers helping to facilitate so that this bilateral relationship, and particularly leading to a resolution of the conflict in both countries, exists in both countries, that outsiders have a role to play. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Ambassador earlier mentioned that he doesn't like to comment on internal matters of a state. He started this discussion by commenting on internal matters of the state, and he once again referred to it several times in his case. I would like to refer to that let us handle our own domestic issues. We will, as we do within our constitution, within our laws, and the mechanisms that are built that would address that. Democracy is not easy. There is voices of people and concern, and we have to address all of our population. We are not a military state, so we cannot take over the government and force an opinion on the people. The people must be brought onto a consensus, and that's a very difficult and time-consuming process, and where people needs to see proof. When 20-ton military-grade bomb is dispatched on you, I think the least of the concern on the other side should be, don't complain about it. We have raised our voice. Our voice is so dangerous. I think that's the only complaint. We would be happy to accept that kind of a deal where Pakistan also only has voice and rhetoric to send our way instead of 20 tons of bomb, military-grade equipment, explosives our way. The other is on squeezing space on the Taliban. I would like to address that Mr. Ambassador mentioned that they cleared Fatah from those that were a threat to Pakistan. If it has the capability of doing that, how come it doesn't have the capability of clearing the rest of the terrorists that he himself just mentioned now on record, that there is no distinguish between the terrorists? And I would like to also address that the quadrilateral process didn't get derailed because of Mansour's killing. That came much later. It came because suddenly the world found out that Mullah Omar was dead for 2 years and was being pretended. Who was directing the war when he was dead? The other thing is, if the space was so squeezed, I can assume that Pakistani leadership was issued a Pakistani passport. Taliban leadership was issued a Pakistani passport to travel to other countries to continue its trade. If that's what you call squeezing space, then I think we are on very different meanings of how to pressure the irreconcilables.
You know, we've promised that there would be time for questions, and I think that time has come. And I ask you to make your questions precise, much to the point, that you ask only one question, and that you identify yourself as well. Okay, this gentleman right here. Coming with a mic, please.
I'm Peter Humphrey.
If you'll just wait for the mic to come.
An intel analyst and a former diplomat. Almost all of the problems in this region are due to the permeability of that border. And you spent a lot of time talking about who does what on whose soil. None of that matters if that border is hermetically sealed. but the Afghan army is too proud to admit its failure. The Pakistani army is too proud to admit its failure. We're now on our second decade of failing to seal that border. How about entertaining an international force along that border to help it be less permeable? Maybe a UN force, or if we really think outside the box, an OIC force along that border. Because once that border is sealed, half of these problems vanish.
Thank you. Sir?
Yeah, sure. I cannot agree more that this border must be managed better. There have been times that there were as many as 80,000 people who would cross border per day without passports and visas. And I think that realization has already sunk in Pakistan. And for the last 2 years, we are focusing a great deal on border management. And the rationale is very, very clear, much similar to what you said, sir, that if there are complaints from Afghan side that there are bad guys going from Pakistan side to create the kind of havoc they do, or if there are bad guys coming from Afghan side to Pakistan side doing the bad things, then the answer lies in better managing that border. That is not to stifle in any manner the movement of genuine bona fide travelers and border crossers, not at all. It's only that they should have a passport and they should have a visa. And I think that is important. For that, we have already started building posts. Hundreds of posts have been erected. We would probably need up to 10 years to do that, but the process has to begin now, and it has begun. We hope that Afghan government can also cooperate with us on that matter, because that is extremely important, as important for them as it is for Pakistan. We believe that the United States also has a better understanding and appreciation of this requirement. This is a very, very valid requirement, and I think Pakistan can do it, Afghanistan can do it, we can do it together bilaterally. I don't think we need any outside force.
And would you stop issuing passports to terrorists who can then cross over the legitimate crossing over the frontier? As stated earlier, Mansour was killed not on crossing the Afghan-Pakistan frontier. I'm sorry to disagree, but this is smokescreen. I think you've been a victim of Pakistan's propaganda of smokescreen. The terrorists are not on the frontier. They're not. It's not the problem of finding. Pakistan's Prime Minister, Gilani's son, was kidnapped in Multan, far away from the frontier, going through several of the security checks. And he was not an ordinary Pakistani citizen. He was the son of their Prime Minister. Now, fair that they crossed the frontier to bring him along to the other side, but that would be our issue. What about the rest of Pakistan? Bin Laden was once again not found on the frontier. He was found in a secure Pakistani suburb. Mansour was killed where he was killed, not on the Afghan frontier. He was traveling legitimate documents. These hospitals that I mentioned are not on the frontier, and they're also not in the ungoverned spaces. Those military grade, I don't know what is a civilian grade explosive, are not made in the frontier. You can't make 20 tons of explosives in ungoverned space. There is systematic government, there is systematic military sponsorship of terrorism. All we ask our dear neighbor is to help us help you. Let's strengthen a strong civilian government in Pakistan. Let's end Pakistan's military occupation of these poor people who are suffering. And let's create a stable region, not just for us, but for the world. Look, Pakistan was built on the name of Islam. We're putting Islam to shame in embarrassing this entire religion based on this extremism, based on terrorism. The entire world is calling on state sponsor of terrorism. But if we call about mechanism, if we're talking about UN or OIC or other mechanism, there are mechanisms within the United Nations for state sponsor of terrorism. Let's apply those. We'll be happy with that.
Let me address this
Yes,
because
please.
this was something quite an outrageous level of allegations. I will not even respond to them because they are quite blatant interference in my internal affairs, and therefore we will not respond. On the mention was made about the passport that was held by Mullah Akhtar Mansoor, which was in the name of a fake identity. He forged that identity and he took that. When we opened borders to Afghan brothers after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, millions came to our side. And 3 million of them are still living there for 37 years. Time and again, we have requested that these people should be allowed to go back. And they should go back. Many of them have taken Pakistani identities. And their second generation has grown. When in other countries, even if small number of refugees come, there is such a hue and cry. But it is Pakistan which has extended this remarkable hospitality for 37 years, which unfortunately is hardly acknowledged. And it is because of that large presence that you see all kinds of people taking all kinds of passports. Thank you.
I think hospitality is appreciated, but you cannot hold that over our head and use terrorism to justify because you gave us space when we needed, and which was paid for by the international community for. By now. Thank you.
Over here, the handsome man with the gray hair, right in front of you, Nasser.
Handsome man.
My comment would be the opposite of the previous.
Thoughts?
Afghanistan wants to be the roundabout of Asia. Without Afghanistan, there can't be economic prosperity for both Central and South Asia. So it's our goal, and it has been our aim to turn ourselves into a hub where ideas, people, and goods flow freely. That has been our mantra, and we would be open to any kind of investment coming in. And this, as I said in the beginning, the three reasons that both our countries must work very hard to end this menace of terrorism in our region, because one was security, the second was economic impact. And not just for us in Pakistan, I think Central Asia would benefit hugely from this too.
Right here. Gentleman right here. In front.
Jalil Afridi from the Frontier Post. Mr. Ambassador,
I'm aware of who you are.
could you be kind enough to tell us how did you get into such a nice democracy in Afghanistan, and if you could teach us some lessons how to go about it?
Thank you. Well, first of all, we empower the civilians, and it is a civilian government. That's how you get to it, and I think there are a lot of international lessons that you can learn from, and one of the things that you can learn from in Afghanistan is the attitude of tolerance. Our current government is a prime example of that. The national unity government, whereas it could have led to instability, we built on democracy to ensure that we come together and put our differences aside. Not to say we don't disagree. We disagree heavily on policy, we disagree heavily on many other matters, but we come to negotiate those within our constitutional benchmarks. And it has been a privilege to have that kind of a system, and we wish it on Pakistan too.
Right here.
Thank you, Marvin. Ruhollah Osmani, I'm a scholar with Johns Hopkins University Science here in DC. Thank you, both ambassadors, for a very frank and interesting discussion. I would like to distract a little bit from the past, and my question is more on moving forward as we are witnessing that the current US administration is talking about a new Afghanistan strategy. And that would be long-term strategy focusing on both military and regional aspects. So as an Afghan, I would like to first pose my first part of question to Ambassador Mohib, that what's Afghanistan expectation from this strategy? What do you want to see in that military, or what do you see beyond that military intervention? And my part of question with regards to Pakistan is the same thing. What is the Pakistan expectation? For example, now if you recall, last week there was a air strike, drones on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, killing TTP senior commander, and that was the fourth in the same year. So if the current US strategy or the future US strategy is to pursue going after the sanctuaries, what would be Pakistan's reaction to that? And would it bring Pakistan to work together in a more stable region? How do you see that? Thank you.
Let's start over here.
All right, okay, sure. Going forward, I believe that there should be a recognition that Pakistan wants to see a peaceful, stable, independent, sovereign, prosperous Afghanistan. Two, there should be a political solution, a political strategy, and not a military solution. But of course, military use of force can be part of that political strategy to achieve those objectives. Three, it should be an Afghan-led reconciliation. Afghan government should lead that process. And there was an example already, like the ambassador mentioned about Gulbuddin Hikmatyar. Whatever method they want to follow, I think we should all be supportive. Four, we should have border management. I think that is important. That is, again, not to say that we should curtail the movement of legitimate border crosses, but only to interdict the cross-border movement of terrorists. And fifth, we should make arrangements for the return of refugees. The ambassador mentioned that international community has borne the price for it. I think he doesn't know the numbers, how much Pakistan government has to subsidize and how much Pakistan government has suffered in terms of socio-economic and cultural consequences. But that is regardless. I think that is something which was a product of the geopolitics of that time. It is done. But going forward, I think there should be arrangements made by the Afghan government and international community. So whatever international community subsidizes can do so on Afghan soil. And the sixth should be that Afghan government and Pakistan government have a lot of agenda to cover. I think they need to adopt a cooperative attitude, not a blame game attitude that we have seen almost incessantly.
Thank you. First of all, we have some immediate needs, and that is our security needs, and that's something that we are working with the administration on addressing for our own security forces, where trainings and some equipment that are part of it, but it's also a broader political strategy that includes sanctuaries across the border, across the frontier. Yes, we agree that there has to be management of flow of terrorists, but there should be, in addition to frontier management, some city management and hospital management and madrasa management and funding management, and all of those require an international consensus and an international support. As for the peace process, absolutely, an Afghan government-led process is one that we believe works best and has already bear fruit. We would like to encourage all of those that are reconcilable to join that process, and we'd continue to work with them. For irreconcilables, those international criminals who don't want anything from Afghanistan, whose goal is not Afghanistan or its government or any kind of part of it, that they need to be dealt with reconnaissance, and that is an area we need to all work together to address. As for, I must address that Afghanistan is a sovereign country, and will continue to be one, and we will fight to our last Afghan to defend our sovereignty. For refugees, we accepted about 600,000 refugees last year. We have plans to accept a similar number. Afghans, wherever they are welcome to their home. They're part of our country and part of our hearts. And their contribution to wherever they lived, they're hardworking people, and their investments have contributed to wherever they live. They have not been a burden. If they have been a burden, I sincerely thank you for taking that burden, but it's time for them to come back, and we're willing to accept all our refugees back to Afghanistan.
In moderating, I'm frequently criticized for not recognizing women's questions, but I haven't seen a hand. Do we have one? All right. After? Wait for the mic, please. The mic is right in front of you.
Absolutely. Like I stated earlier, this conflict is far beyond Afghanistan. In the 1990s, when the civil war happened in Afghanistan, post the Soviet withdrawal, it was, in a way, a blessing for the international community because the war was contained within Afghanistan. It didn't go beyond it. In the age of internet, and in the age where there are already instabilities across the world, this war will not be contained within the Afghan borders. This will, within our territory, this will go beyond and will have a global implication. Whoever, no matter where they sit, think that this conflict is far away from them, are making a spatial mistake. This will come to them if we don't end it where they are. It will embolden, not just the terrorist, it also emboldens those states that believe that they can use proxies for their foreign agenda. And why wouldn't any other country do it? If one is tolerated, others have to be tolerated too. And it's much cheaper to sponsor a proxy than it is to fight it. It takes a lot of resources that we have witnessed in Afghanistan. The cost analysis is huge, tremendous. So it leaves a really difficult precedence. It will leave a very challenging precedence for the international community because we don't have institutions to deal with it. Our current institutions, such as the United Nations, ICO, and others, are built to work with state actors, not with non-state actors. And this conflict of non-state actors and tolerance or support for them, even tolerance alone, is a tremendous existential threat to the international community.
Gentleman in the far rear, in front of the camera.
Thank you. My name is Nadeem. I work for Voice of America. Questions from both the ambassadors. First, President Ashraf Ghani said recently China is willing to play a role of mediating between the two countries. Do you think that can work? That's one. Second, United States is going to send more troops to Afghanistan. How would that impact? What do you think would be the impact in the outcome of the conflict?
Yes, thank you. Ambassador?
Well, I think the Chinese were part of the quadrilateral coordination group that was formed early last year and worked. And I believe China also has stakes, being a neighbor of Afghanistan, in the stability of Afghanistan. So I believe that Chinese can play an important role in contributing and helping bring peace and stability in Afghanistan. I can also respond to the question that you had raised, that there were, if the geopolitics continues, then perhaps the conflict can expand, I think that would be most undesirable. I think it is extremely important. I agree with the ambassador that the issue is resolved and not expanded. And that is why the entire region will be much better off if there is a solution that comes to the present situation.
Did you want to comment?
Absolutely. We hope that there will be sincere talks. In the past, one of the reasons things have not, negotiations have not gone, produced results is because promises are made within the first few minutes of the conversation, and then they're never implemented. So we're always optimistic. From a generation that was born in a war, there is nothing more than we want to end it. So we welcome any process that would bring an end to it, but and we will go to this process with full sincerity as we always do. We hope that will be reciprocated and that we'll have a meaningful dialogue with follow-up for results.
Thank you. We do have this staff side.
There is a woman.
We found one.
I think Master
Okay.
to take
Go
lead
ahead,
on this.
yes.
Well, it's really refreshing to talk to this new administration, who is very interested in that aspect. We have spent far more time with this administration talking about the prospect of an economic development through investments than we have in the past, and we welcome that. I think there is a tremendous amount of resources, both in Afghanistan and in the region, that could lead to bring stability and meet the needs of that region. And we're always open to it, but we are happy that we are able to talk to this administration, and that is part of their strategy towards Afghanistan.
I agree that not only the United States, but the entire international community should stay engaged in meeting the development needs of Afghanistan. Pakistan also is participating in that, and I think that is only natural that all countries should chip in.
I do think, though, if I might comment on this, that we have to see yet with the new administration whether its policy toward the region is going to emphasize hard power at the exclusion of soft power. I think that this is something which is implicit in your question, because you're saying that soft power has a very central role to play here in pacifying and finding cooperation in the region. We'll take one last question now. I know that, okay, two, just two then. Okay, back, the gentleman back there, right there. Yes, his hand is still up.
No.
Yeah.
No.
No. This. Hey. It doesn't seem as if the mic is working.
Sure. I think Pakistan does agree that terrorism is an international problem. It is a regional problem and it is a national problem in Pakistan also. We have these militants who create instability and we have waged a fight against them, which is still continuing. And the good news is that we are winning. We are winning that war against them. And the proof is that you can go and see for yourself what has happened. You can see the improved law and order. You can see the situation on ground. So that is. Second, we also agree that it is the economy and the soft power, the economic stakes that are needed. And therefore, we are very much committed to building those economic stakes with Afghanistan. And we think that there are huge prospects for that because President Ashraf Ghani also, given his background, has very creative ideas in that domain.
Okay, a final question now. All right, this gentleman right there, right in front of you.
Thank you, sir. So this is Jahan Zebari. I'm from Airway News TV, Pakistan. So my question with the Afghanistan ambassador and Pakistan ambassador too, sir, as you and your government blame Pakistan for few of the terrorist attacks in Afghanistan, can you just please explain what kind of benefits and gains Pakistan is getting by supporting terrorist activities in Pakistan? And my second question is that in the Obama administration, in the last 3 years tenure, Obama administration stopped calling Afghan Taliban as terrorists. So what do you think about, I don't know about the Trump administration position on Taliban, but Obama administration never called them terrorists. And the same question is with Mr. Aizaz Chaudhry. What is the Pakistan position on Taliban? Are they terrorists? Thank you.
To address your first question is exactly what I posed to the ambassador here, and we have posed to the previous ambassadors, both in private and public, on identifying the objectives. It would help us. We may be able to address those distinctly. We cannot address psychological fears that they may have over India or any. But we can address realities, and this is where verifications coming to being. We'll be happy to hear that on whatever those objectives are for declaring this kind of a warfare on us. The second is on the role of on terrorists. Those who kill a single Afghan for their political desires in Afghanistan are terrorists. We don't distinguish between them. Those who operate and give them space. You heard me earlier that while on the political levels, on the leadership level, some may distinguish themselves and give themselves different name and brands, but when it comes to terrorism, they're all the same. They're all targeted. This month of Ramadan, we witnessed one 20-ton military-grade explosive truck laden with military-grade explosives attack a diplomatic community against Geneva Conventions. Who does that? Terrorists or civilians? So they must be. They attacked a mosque. They attacked a police station. Headquarters. They've been attacking funeral prayers, and this is all just this month. The toll on the Afghan people from this terrorism is enormous. Last year, we had 27,000 casualties. Last year alone. That's 27,000 families mourning. Either they're dead or they're injured. That toll by itself, if anybody wants to make a friend in Afghanistan, must calculate those numbers. The more you kill, the more you injure in Afghanistan, the harder it will become to then reconcile and to create that cooperative environment. Because every one of those families no longer wants to have this cooperative discussion that we want to have there today, because they suffer. This is humans' loss. And I think no matter what country and what ethnicity you are, a human's loss is a human loss. We should not ignore or forget our humanity in this manner.
Pastor Chaudhry, you have the last word.
All right. What benefit to Pakistan? None. No benefit. Because we want to see stability in Afghanistan. And I agree with the ambassador that not even loss of a single life is not acceptable. And I think this is a clear consensus that terrorism and violence on any ground, taking innocent lives, is not acceptable. As far as the Taliban, those who commit terrorism, they are terrorists. Whoever commits terrorism is a terrorist. Thank you.
Well, we've ended on a note of agreement, which is always welcome. I want to again thank both of the ambassadors for, as an understatement, a candid, at times, exchange. But I think that's what we were interested in having here. We wanted to have the best that there is in this town, really, for making the case for their own country. That's what they're here for, to represent their country. And I think that they do so admirably. And I also want to commend the audience here for excellent questions. Thank you. And let's show our appreciation to the ambassadors.
Weinbaum, thank you.
Pleasure.
Ambassador?
Good night.
All right. Thank you.
You can go home now, or your offices. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting
Thank you
this.
very much.
Absolutely appreciate it. I know it's easier to host other kind of discussion, but
Thank you.
Well, for their own cause. Yeah.
Ambassador,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Marvin, you want to take a
Yes, please.
quick picture with us?
All right? Good. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, Ramadan Mubarak. Oh yes, of course. Yes, please do that. Oh, thank you. See, I got my cards. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
I'd never come to INDUS before, so I'm really glad to have had this opportunity. Thank you for hosting. Absolutely. It's all over. It's all over. Thank you. To end its support to non-state actors, work with the government of Afghanistan.
Much more animated than I thought it would be.
Well, you guys definitely, picked a hot topic.
I was thinking that would be a little bit more calm, but it was just